There are many different capital improvements, and the landlords, depending on the size of the building, the landlord can pass through 50% or 100% of the cost to the tenant.
好，繼續翻嚟由安樂居呈現嘅不老80，今日咧就繼續咧講一啲租務條例。其實咧喺三藩市嚟講咧，租務管制咧好重要，因為喺三藩市咧佔咗60% 嘅人口咧都係租緊屋㗎嚇。咁究竟你而家住緊嘅地方係咪受到租務管制咧嚇？咁一陣同大家講講啦。咁仲有咧就係如果有啲人咧就係遇到逼遷嘅話咧，租務委員會點樣可以幫到佢哋咧？嗱，最後啦就係業主方面啦，如果遇到一啲唔好嘅租客，咁啊租務委員會又點幫到佢哋咧？嗱，今日咧就請嚟咧三藩市租務委員會嘅行政主任 Christina 同我哋繼續講講啦。So what are the fundamental protection the rent board offers for the tenants, such as rent control or protection against illegal evictions?
Yes, so in San Francisco, rent control usually applies to buildings that have 2 or more units that were built before 1979,
okay.
Which is actually a lot of our housing stock. We have many old
so that
properties.
Means single-family house is not under the rent control?
Well, that's a very, very good question, especially here in many neighborhoods. We have a house that's maybe built in 1940, and downstairs there is a unit.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we say, generally speaking, now this is not in every case, but generally speaking, let's say the owner lives upstairs with their family, and downstairs is a separate unit with a separate entrance. They don't share the unit with the landlord. We would consider this to be a 2-unit property.
I see.
Yes. Now,
how about like share the rooms, like they got like the roommates, like they living in the upstairs. Maybe some of the landlords they rent out 1 or 2 of the rooms.
Simply put, that if one tenant is residing in the home with the landlord, generally, then that tenancy would not be under rent control. We would consider that person to be what is called a lodger. However, if the landlord is, the owner, and let's say the owner and their family, they live in the house, they use upstairs, downstairs, they rent one room to somebody and another room to another distinct person, those likely, both of those tenancies would be considered to be under rent control.
Oh, I see. So what is the rent control like protect the tenant?
Like I think I said previously, we have an annual allowable limit of a rent limit that the landlord is allowed to charge the tenant. So that is one very important piece of our law. The other important piece of our law is what we call just cause eviction protections. So there are certain reasons why a landlord may be able to evict a tenant. For example, a reason we would call that a fault reason, which is the tenant is not paying their rent or they're contributing to health and safety issues, in the severe health and safety issues in the unit or for other tenants in the building, something like that. Or for what we call a no-fault reason, for example, the landlord wants to move into the tenant's unit as what we call an owner move-in, or wants to move their relative in. So this is very simply put, but there are several just cause reasons. But these are 2 of the main protections. Also, there are some other protections. For example, if a landlord wants to raise the rent for having done capital improvement work on the property, or other types of increases that are beyond the annual allowable, some tenants might have the ability to claim financial hardship from those types of increases. So that's another tenant protection that's in the law.
But how many months of the rent if they don't pay for the rents then, so the landlord can do the eviction?
A landlord could attempt to evict the tenant for not having paid just 1 month. There are many requirements, there are proper noticing procedures, etc. I always recommend to get advice in that case.
So what specific support does the rent board provide for the landlords?
Yes. We do provide much education to landlords about their rights and responsibilities under the law. There are some types of rent increases the owner can seek. For example, they can seek an increase above the allowable limit. What is very common is for having done certain types of capital improvement work to the property.
Okay.
For example, replacing a roof or painting the entire exterior of the building, other similar types of work. There are many different capital improvements, and the landlords, depending on the size of the building, the landlord can pass through 50% or 100% of the cost to the tenants. And so it's a win for the landlord, and they're able to both preserve the state of their property and make it better for the tenants at the same time.
What should the landlords keep in mind when dealing with different type of tenants?
I would say most of the rights that the younger tenants and longer-term tenants have are the same. However, longer-term tenants may have rights because they've been in the property longer and perhaps they are older. For example, with certain types of evictions, there are required relocation payments that the landlord must pay to the tenant. And in a tenancy where there is a tenant who is 60 or older, the landlord may be required to pay an increased amount to that tenant. And maybe a younger tenant might not receive that. However, for households that have minor children in them, they may also get an increased relocation amount. So it really depends on the situation. But a lot of times there are some cases, for example, with owner move-in evictions where the owner may not be able to evict the tenant because they are over 60 and have been living in the property for 10 years or more.
I see.
So that is a very crucial situation. Perhaps maybe it's a building with 4 units and there's a unit that the owner themselves wants to move into, and they say, oh, there's a tenant though that may be protected from that, so they have to choose a different unit to move into.
Thank you, Christina. OK， 一陣間翻嚟咧就會講60歲以上嘅長者有啲咩特別嘅一啲保障等等，一陣快再傾。